Tim Penny, we were chit-chatting before we went on the air that Tim doesn't want to admit this, but his roots actually go back to only a few miles down the road from where I grew up. This would be bad for your reputation, Tim.
Yeah,
if you let...
the first Penny homestead in Freeborn County was just a couple miles from, well, actually, I think we were right in the edge of Freeborn County, and your family's homestead would have been just a mile or two away in Faribault County. But anyway, very close, same roots.
Well,
so I don't know what that says about you or me, but we come from the same soil.
And we didn't get too far from home. Your career took you a little farther away, and you came back home again.
Yeah. Well, I ended up after college moving to Richland, which is not too far from Matawan, which is where your family farm is, and then lived there until I was done with politics, and then moved to Waseca. We got our kids out of school and off to college, and now that I run the foundation, the Southern Minnesota Foundation, which is housed in Owatonna, I've drifted to Owatonna. So when you add it all up, maybe about 45 miles from my roots down there, not too far from Wells.
Well, the reason you are here is to talk about the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, and part of that is a farmland retention program. So we maybe better start, Tim, at square one and talk a bit more about the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, and then we'll move into this exciting program, farmland retention.
Yeah, well, let me start with just a quick overview of the foundation. The Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation has been around since the middle 1980s. It came into existence at the time of the farm crisis, when we were losing far too many of our young farmers here.
I lived through that.
It was awful.
It wasn't fun for anyone.
No, and I was in Congress at that time, and Congress had to play a role with some debt restructuring legislation, but it took way too long, and we lost too many farmers in the process. But this foundation was created by the McKnight Foundation, which then was Minnesota's largest family foundation, and they weren't known to do a lot of work in rural Minnesota, but when they saw how communities in rural Minnesota were hurting, they decided one thing they could do is help to create regional foundations that could then invest their resources into the future, the economic future.
Kind of like economic development in rural Minnesota.
Yeah, that's really what it was about. And so there are 6 of these rural foundations collectively serving the 80 non-metro counties here in Minnesota, and the Southern Minnesota Foundation covers a 20-county region, which in my case is an affair of the heart because it's essentially the same counties that I served when I was representing Southern Minnesota in Congress. And we do 3 things. We invest in small business startups, early stage businesses, with some lending programs, some grant making activity, also some technical assistance, and a service corps of retired executives that work out of our office to help small businesses succeed. We invest roughly $2 million a year, about 40% of our budget, in a variety of early childhood initiatives, and I won't go into detail, but the needs there are great, and if you get these kids ready for kindergarten, they'll do much better thereafter.
And get them off started.
Get them off to a better start, and so we layer our resources in a variety of ways into early childhood success, and then we help smaller towns create community funds, and currently we have 24 smaller towns in southern Minnesota for whom we play the role of a fiscal agent, so that they can create and maintain a community fund and invest their own resources back into projects and activities that will keep their smaller towns vibrant.
Well, Tim, we have to take a break for the markets here in about 30 seconds, but this sounds really exciting. Obviously, you enjoy what you're doing, that you're helping people.
It's all about collaboration and partnership, which is not necessarily what I experienced when I was a politician. So I love it for that reason, and I think the 3 areas of our work are critically important to the success of our region, and we try to be a good partner with other groups and organizations that are working in these areas.
Well, welcome back to today's AM Minnesota program. My guest is Tim Penny, who is the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation Executive Director. Tim, I was thinking about a comment you made before the break about the whole foundation is about economic activity, building the economy in rural Minnesota, and yet you have a lot of emphasis too on the youth and younger kids. And
I always say the reason we invest in early childhood is because it's a long-term bet on a quality workforce for our region, because it's self-evident that if kids don't start school ready to learn, many of them never catch up. And and that just means that they're not going to have academic success, means that they're not going to leave high school, even if they do graduate, on a path toward a good career for themselves. So we think starting early pays huge, huge dividends. And what we do in the early childhood realm is we do some grant making for community programs that are designed to improve and enhance the quality of early childhood efforts within those communities. We have 20 AmeriCorps personnel. This is like the Domestic Peace Corps. We assign them to early childhood sites around the region. They become essentially a teacher aide, working primarily with kids that have the greatest social and emotional challenges, and helping them to get ready for kindergarten. We also have a strategic planning process where 1 or 2 communities a year come to us, and we do a facilitated planning process around unmet early childhood needs in their community, and we put some grant dollars behind programs or activities that grow out of that process. And then we have tens of thousands of books that we distribute to groups and organizations every year to support reading programs for preschool age children. So those are the kinds of resources we can bring to the table in the early childhood realm. And as I say, we really are a supplement, a complement to what others are doing to help these young kids get off to a better start.
Well, you mentioned you're all about collaboration, working together, pulling the right levers to get people to work together.
Yeah, leveraging our resources, and I think it's a good model, and I think we're also doing training of early childhood providers to help them get rated under the Parent Aware rating system, which is the quality rating system that is now sponsored by the state of Minnesota, and we're also doing some parent education projects when we can get specific grants to support it. We work with area businesses to go into the work site over the lunch hour and do parent education training and send books home with these parents and do other things to help them do a better job with their own preschool age kids.
And then you mentioned too, with the economic help that you have with individuals that know a lot about business. Maybe I have the greatest idea, inventions in sliced bread. I know a lot about my world of agriculture, but in terms of starting another type of business, the business planning, all those things, well, you've got people that can help someone with that.
We have a partnership with the Small Business Administration. We get several $100,000 a year that we can put out in small enterprise loans. And we do between 20 and 30 of those essentially startup or early stage loans every year. And we can provide technical assistance to the people that receive those loans from us. But we also have roughly 35 mostly retired executives, people that have run their own business or been executives in a business. And they are available to be mentors to any small business in our area that's facing a challenge with human resource policies or marketing or keeping their books, whatever their challenge might be. We can match you up with the right mentor out of this group of 35 SCORE volunteers, and at no cost to you, they can give you some guidance and some assistance to do a better job running your business and becoming more profitable.
Who's a number of years ago, Pete Johnson here in Faribault was a retired executive.
He's involved with the SCORE.
It was
he's one
like
of our
that.
leaders.
Yes, and
I say we because they're an independent, freestanding SCORE chapter. In fact, they were the only newly certified SCORE chapter in the entire country a couple of years ago, because we started out this SCORE effort as a subsidiary of the Rochester SCORE chapter. But I felt it was so important to bring those Service Corps of retired executives, those SCORE volunteers, to the Faribault, Waseca, Owatonna, Albert Lea area, that we offered to house a SCORE chapter in our office. And it's been wildly successful. They're enthusiastic, they're smart, they're capable, they just do a great job. I'm told that in any given month they're mentoring like roughly 20 small business owners and operators. So it's a great resource. We work in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce here in town and others to market this service to businesses in the area that might need this assistance. But it's just another resource that's available in part because we help create this SCORE chapter, even though they are an independent entity,
it fits in very well
it fits
with
in
what
nicely
you
with
do.
what we do, and we allow them to use our workspace to meet with their clients, etc. So it's a great partnership.
The thing that I liked about it when I was visiting with them is, well, maybe this business will be successful, and they might not
They'll
be
say,
a Fortune
"Wait a minute."
500 company, but maybe they have 10 or 15
Yeah.
or 50 employees. And you know what? Maybe we all don't have to move up to the metro
Yeah.
area to work.
Well, and you know, a lot of more recent economic development research says that, you know, in a town, your economic growth is going to depend more on the existing businesses that grow and prosper than in any big box that you can kind of bring in and plop in town. So we think that is the key to economic success across rural Minnesota, especially in our smaller towns, is to really help our existing businesses grow and be as profitable as they can be, and to also help nurture some new startups, because we've got a very entrepreneurial spirit here. But if you don't get off to a good start, you know,
just like that, getting our kids off to a good start.
Yeah, you may not have that business for very long, and the resources we offer, including the SCORE volunteers, are resources that help these new businesses get off to a better, stronger start.
Well, we better move on then. The Farmland Retention Program. Now, when you think about economic development, economic activity, we've got some beautiful farmland, and I would argue it's one of our most valuable resources here in the area.
Well, there are a couple of things about that. In Minnesota, about 20–25% of our economy is still tied to agriculture one way or another, whether it's production agriculture, whether it's the farm input industries.
The processing, look at here in Faribault, the Genio
the food
turkey
industry,
store.
yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, it's huge, and it's really huge here in our corner of the state. But also, as you just indicated, the largest share of the wealth here in rural Minnesota is tied to our land. And so we began thinking about sort of the value of helping younger people stay on the land, and oftentimes the way younger people get started in agriculture is to rent, and to be and to have a relationship with a retired or retiring farm family to.
Unless you happen to have been born in the right family, where you can inherit a lot.
Which also happens, but you know, we look around and we see some examples of farm families that maybe don't have an heir to pass their land on to, and in those cases you'll either sell it at some point, or you'll have a renting relationship that allows some younger, newer farmer to get established in agriculture. And then we also looked at the work we're doing with the 24 smaller towns for whom we manage their community funds. And we thought, well, you know, maybe there's a role we can play in helping these smaller towns accept farmland as a gift. But instead of, you know, selling it and putting all that money into an endowment, maybe what we could do is offer to continue to rent that farmland, preferably to whoever is currently renting it from that farm family, and then we'll pay all the expenses and the taxes, and allow the proceeds each year to go into that community fund budget. So they can either then put that amount of money into their endowment and build their endowment, which is then going to generate perpetual dollars for community projects, or they can put it into their programmatic budget and have that amount of money every year to fund programs, scholarships, recreational equipment at the town park, whatever it might be that's important to that town. So we're just now offering this program as a benefit to the 24 towns for whom we help manage community funds, and we're hoping that we'll get some takers before long. And if we do, it's going to make a huge, huge difference in terms of taking that local resource and keeping it working for our local communities.
Well, what a way for a family maybe that doesn't have an heir that wants to actively farm the land to create a legacy. And instead of selling it and maybe it's developed, or maybe it is farmed to an absentee owner, and all the money leaves the community.
Yeah, this is a way of keeping the money local, and we believe that there are lots of people that will be attracted to this legacy, this idea of a legacy that they can leave behind to the benefit of the community that's been a part of their lives. So we'll see how this goes, but appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. You know, we're meeting with area attorneys, area accountants, area investment managers, and others to kind of get the word out about this program that we are prepared to manage on behalf of our community funds. And every year we also get 1 or 2 new communities that approach us to say, can you help us create a community fund? So over time we're going to have even more towns in southern Minnesota that have community funds and for whom this farmland retention program could be a real benefit.
So exactly how would it work? Say you had a family that wanted to do this. They would contact you, and maybe they were retired, so they still need the land to support them for the time being.
Yeah, well, we can, this can be set up in a variety of ways. Our sister foundation, the Southwestern Initiative Foundation, which covers 18 counties from Hutchinson all the way down to Marshall, sort of in
so kind of the west half,
the west half of the state. They created this program, and we basically just modeled it and brought it to our region. And they've already got a few farms that have been donated, but in a variety of ways. And I think in one instance, it's whenever the children stop farming, then at that point the assets are turned over and then used to the benefit of that southwestern region. In other cases, it's set up in a way that you can take retirement income as long as you need it, and then at that point the proceeds go to the community fund or the Southwestern Initiative Foundation or the Southern Minnesota Foundation, whoever you designate it toward. But sometimes it's more immediate, where it's immediately transferred, and then at that point the proceeds from the rent, after paying expenses and taxes, go to the benefit of the foundation. So all of this is sort of individually structured, and you're going to want to do a couple of things. If you live near a town for whom we manage a community fund, you'll want to start talking to the board members of that local community fund. We will be in the mix to help support that negotiation. We'll make sure that you want to make sure that on both sides of the table there's proper legal work being done.
Yeah, I was going to say attorneys are going to have to be involved.
Farm family's going to have their attorney involved. The farm family may want a farm manager involved, and we'll do the same on behalf of the community funds to make sure that there's legal and accounting work being done on both sides of that table, and draw up the appropriate paperwork to designate how that transfer is going to occur.
Like capital gains taxes, then would they be able to avoid?
They'd have to think their way through that, and it may have different implications depending upon how
it's set up,
how you want to set it up. So all of that can be very individualized, and again, we'll make sure that on both sides of the table, on the donor side, the farmer side, as well as the recipient side, the community fund side, we'll make sure that all of those I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and it's done in a way that benefits everyone.
And it won't be, if it happens to be close to a community, it wouldn't be sold for development. Then it would have to stay as farmland.
That would be the intent, and so we, I mean, there's every reason to keep this as farmland to be rented, because that then honors the intent of the donor to make sure that those proceeds year after year after year continue to go to the support of that local community. And
the local county would continue
to
get the real estate taxes, which is a big thing in rural areas.
Nothing comes off the tax rolls, even though it's donated as a charitable gift. There's nothing that comes off the tax rolls.
Well, this sounds kind of exciting if it's the right fit for certain families.
Yeah, I've got to believe that there are families out there that are sort of in a place where this might be a good option for them. They'd really like to give something back, all of a portion of a farm, and again, that's really the decision the donor has to make. But we certainly hope that we're piquing the interest of people in the region to consider this as an option, because look, you and I have roots down in Faribault, Freeborn County, and I think that says something about our commitment to rural Minnesota, that we're both, even though our farms were down there, how far have we drifted? And we're still, in our respective professions, sort of committed to this southern Minnesota region. And I have to believe there are lots of people out there, including many farm families, that are so committed to the region and so committed to their local community that this would be an attractive option for them.
And ultimately, if it was set up that way, the foundation would be in charge of managing it, finding the renters, or you would hire a professional farm manager to do it. The thing that pops in my mind is we've all heard the stories of children, grandchildren that inherit a large sum of money, and before very long, it's all gone. Well, this is a way to make sure that that asset is taken care of and benefits possibly their children or grandchildren for a while, but ultimately maybe the community.
Yeah, it can be set up in that way precisely, and that's just one of several options that a donor would have to consider.
We should probably back up too for just a minute, back to the original foundation. And I was on your website and looked at your board of directors. Why don't you explain how that structure is set up and the professionalism that's there?
Sure.
If ultimately you end up owning the Grosskreutz land.
Yeah. Well, we have a board of directors that have fiduciary responsibility to run the organization, help set the parameters of the kind of work that we do in the region, and to manage our resources, because we at the foundation have an endowment fund that is now in excess of $30 million, so we're able to take roughly $1 million worth of earnings off of that fund to put into our programming. But we are an independent, autonomous foundation. We try to have a quality board of directors drawn from communities all across this 20-county region.
And also I looked at a lot of diverse backgrounds too.
Oh yeah. We have an attorney on our board. We have a retired CFO from Federated Insurance on our board.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. We have a lady that's basically managing the Destination Medical Center project in Rochester, who is on our board. We have the owner and the operator of Sturdy Wheat, which is a pancake mix company up in Red Wing, on our board. I could go on and on, but you get
large
the sense.
Business,
these are
small business.
Yep. And we've got some early childhood experts that are on our board. So it's a diverse board, and they have now undertaken with me and the staff a strategic planning process to sort of map out the priorities and the goals of our foundation for the next several years. So we're on the front end of that planning process, and I'm pretty sure we're going to stay heavily lodged in the three areas we're currently working: economic development, early childhood assistance, and community funds. But there are some other issues that are kind of percolating, like the workforce issues in our region, and also the increasing diversity of the population in our region as more and more.
And if you see a need, we might start.
Yeah. So we've got, with a budget somewhere around $5 million a year, we've got some flexibility to take on new initiatives or to augment some of our existing initiatives. So we're involved in that process now, and I've got just a great board. And the chairman of our board today is Jean Burkhart, who's a former county commissioner and has been involved in nonprofit work most of her life. But she lives in the rural area south and west of Fairmont, about as far southwest in our 20-county region as you can get. But she bleeds rural. She really is passionate about rural. But the incoming chair, starting next July, will be Jennifer Sawyer, who's out of Northfield, and her company, Rebound Enterprises, is all about acquiring and bringing stronger management to companies that are struggling and turning them around. And they own the Archer House, for example, in downtown through Rebound Enterprises. They really brought that hotel restaurant facility back. So I'm excited that she's stepping in to be the chair in just a few short months. I did want to mention a couple things that are going on. Speaking of how workforce is emerging as an issue, when the Destination Medical Center project was announced a year ago or 2 years ago, many of the smaller towns around Rochester said, well, there's going to be an awful lot of growth in Rochester. What does that mean to us? So we helped to fund what's called Southeastern Minnesota Together, and it's a series of community dialogues. And there's been in excess of 100 people at each of these dialogues so far, another one to be held in Winona later this week, on sort of the workforce challenges and opportunities for all of southern Minnesota. So in Winona on December 3rd, most of the day at the Tao Center at Winona State, there will be another one of these dialogues. I also wanted to mention related to local foods, which we think is another way for small-scale farmers to really be engaged in agriculture. We're doing a feast festival, a local foods festival. We'll have over 100 local food producers and processors at this event, as well as I think roughly 40 or 50 buyers coming to sample and hopefully make some purchase agreements.
Here.
But it's going to be open to the public, and that'll be that'll be this coming Friday afternoon, December 4th, and Saturday pretty much all day, December 5th, at the Mayo Civic Center in Rochester. And we had 1,200 visitors come and sample this stuff last year. We hope for an even bigger crowd this year.
And I assume all this information
is on our website.
Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. I just went to the search engine and typed it in, and your website popped right out. So. Thanks for coming in, Tim. Enjoyed visiting with you.